And like, what a fucking dick. You're 34 years old. Get your shit together. What's up everyone, my name is Kelsey. Welcome back to my channel. Today we are doing kind of a new thing. Hopefully this will be the first in a series. Basically, I'm going to be rereading books that I used to love as like a high schooler, a middle schooler. I am 29, so that was anywhere from 10 to 15 years ago are the books I'm going to be reading. And this first book, this is almost embarrassing to admit, but when I was in middle school and early high school, I got like deep into romance, like nonstop, constant romance in every genre. Like I would read historical romance, Western romance, contemporary romance, straight up erotica in 8th grade, so that's nice. One of the authors that my library had a lot of books of was Diana Palmer. And if you don't know Diana Palmer, she writes Western romances. So I found this book at a library book sale and picked it up for this video. I don't remember much about it. I do remember reading a lot of this author, but this specific book, I can't recall. The names are very familiar, so there's a good chance I read this multiple times. I would tell you what I remember of the plot, but I don't remember anything of the plot. If what I remember about this author holds true, there will at some point be a surprise, accidental, or secret pregnancy, and it will likely end in some sort of marriage proposal or marriage or wedding, or they'll get married at some point during this book. I'm going to do this like vlog style, so I'll be giving little updates as I read the book and probably reading hilarious passages from it. No hate if you love Western romance, no hate if you love Diana Palmer, but my taste has changed so much since I was an 8th grader that I can only imagine this is going to be fucking hilarious for me. I'm gonna read the synopsis really quick and see if there's anything I can tell you about it. Well, our male main character's name is Judd Dunn. Oh, great. Okay, so first paragraph of the synopsis here. Judd put Chrissy is our main female character's name, put Chrissy's father in jail, and because she was so young and innocent and their jointly owned ranch was on the verge of bankruptcy, Judd married Chrissy. How old was she at this time? I'll update you. He vowed that it would be marriage in name only, and they would ignore the sexual tension between them, of course. What a good man. So already, they're married. All right, so it seems like we're following this book 5 years in the future when there's some sort of mystery and murder going on in the town. So at this point, they should be divorcing, but instead, they have to protect each other by staying married for some reason. I assume we'll find out more. Okay, it seems like I'm not gonna be very long between updates here because I'm on page 1 of chapter 1, and our very first paragraph describes young Chrissy Gaines' body in detail, okay? Just to give you a little taste here. Christabel Gaines was wearing a low-cut white top with faded blue jeans, a book bag slung casually over one shoulder. The top outlined her small, firm breasts, and the jeans clung lovingly to every softly rounded line of her young body. I'm so sorry, past me, for your self-esteem issues. The faint breeze caught her long blonde hair in her pretty bow-shaped mouth against her wide forehead and high cheekbones. Jesus. Okay, so I'm on page 2 of this, wait, technically it's page 8, the second actual reading page. And so far we've described Chrissy and her body, which is, it sounds pretty great to me. We've got a little description of our man. He's tall, graceful, dark, powerful legs is what we've got so far. He's also a Texas Ranger. But on this page, after our description of both of our characters, Chrissy is admiring him from afar with all of her friends, and she says, he was the sexiest, most wonderful man in the world. She owed him everything she had, everything she was. Sometimes she wished with all her heart that she'd been born beautiful, and maybe then he'd notice her the way she wanted him to. I don't know what about our page 1 description says this girl is ugly. So far, this book is living up to all of my horrified expectations. And we're only on page 8, so at this point, I'm going to limit my updates to like every 5 pages or so. Otherwise, I'll be coming to you with new information every time I turn a page. Okay, I know I said every 5 pages, but we're on page 9 and so we know from the descriptions that we're getting here that Chrissy and Judd, I just can't get over those names, own a ranch together. He took responsibility for her when she was 16. I assume we'll find out why, and made the ranch more successful, blah, blah, blah. So he determinedly walks up to Christy. He walked right up to Christabel, towering over her to the astonishment of her classmates. We've had an offer, he said, taking her by the upper arm as impersonally as he'd have an apprehended felon. I need to talk to you. Judd, I'm only between classes, she protested. This won't take a minute, he muttered, narrowing his black eyes as he searched for a secluded spot. He found one under a big live oak tree. Come on. She was escorted forcibly to the tree while her companions watched. escorted forcibly. What is wrong with this man? All right, we're on page 14 now. We have ages revealed at this point, and these two have been married for 5 years, just so we're clear. 5 years. And Chrissy is now 2 months shy of 21. She is 20 years old. Judd is 34. So at this point, I feel like Judd is a giant douchebag. There's a little bit of Chrissy flirting with him, and he is very determined to not look at her in a sexual way. I guess that's admirable. All right, now on page 22, these two have let a movie company rent their ranch to film because it'll make them a bunch of money and they'll be able to like buy new cows. We've got this new background that when she was 16, like her dad was super abusive and Judd caught him beating her and stopped him and sent him to jail for that for apparently more than 5 years, which I kind of find hard to believe. I don't know, maybe he has pull because he's a Texas Ranger. Anyways, she has scars from this assault, and there's this horrifying paragraph where she says she's talking about how Judd knows who this famous actress that is coming to their ranch is and how she's beautiful and every man is attracted to her. That's some bullshit, but okay. And it says this woman's name is Tippy Moore. She had the face of an angel and a body that begged for caresses. Unlike poor Christabel, whose face was passable but not really pretty, and whose body was like the poor beasts in the story of Dr. Frankenstein's monster. What the fuck, Chrissy? This girl needs therapy. Also, during the last 5 pages, Chrissy recounts a story where this one dude who worked for them bought some unauthorized stuff using their account and they ended up firing him. And she never told Judd, but this dude made a bunch of passes at her and she had to threaten him to get him to stop. And a few days after he was fired, this cow turned up dead and Chrissy tried to tell Judd that it might have been him and it was malicious, and Judd didn't believe her because he thinks she's just being dramatic for attention. Like, you know, bullshit. All right, so now we're on chapter 2. Okay, I just want to put this theory out here because I want to remember if I'm guessing. I mean, technically I've read this before, so I could just remember, but this movie that's going to be filming here has a hot guy and a hot girl. And I bet you anything, hot girl is going to want to hook up with Judd, and that's fine. But hot guy is going to want to hook up with Chrissy, and Judd's going to throw a fucking fit about it. Because that just feels like the dynamic we're coming to. We'll see if I'm right. All right, page 30. There's a whole bunch of emotional exposition in these pages where Chrissy is just thinking about her past and being emotionally distraught. I feel like that's happening a lot already, and it's getting kind of annoying. So now we know, after Chrissy went through this traumatic event, that her dad was arrested and died in prison, and then her mom died shortly after. So really, she was like 17 when both her parents died, and her dad had always been abusive, and she was married to a guy who didn't really want to be married to her. So one thing I'm finding realistic about Chrissy is her emotional dependence. There are things sometimes there are just lines in here that just annoy the fuck out of me for their sheer idiocy. Like, Chrissy's mom made this comment about Judd hooking up with women in this bigger city nearby, and Chrissy was devastated that Judd wouldn't honor their marriage vows, even though it was all on paper. And she says, realistically, he couldn't have gone without a woman for several years. She knew that. I just don't see why, realistically, he couldn't have gone. She's doing all right. All right, page 38. I swear every page brings something new to annoy the fuck out of me. So, we just met Cash Greer, who is another ranger or police officer or something. Somehow Chrissy has gone 5 years without giving away this secret to anyone, and within 5 minutes of conversation with Cash, she accidentally reveals that her and Judd are married. I'm wondering why Judd and her had to get married at all, because she was 16 when her dad went to jail, but 17 when her mom died, and I'd find it hard to believe that any judge would require her to go into foster care at 17 when she has a stable home that's owned and is being passed on to her. We also have this section in here. Oh, Cash is interested in Chrissy. He's 38, but he's from the city. It says he was fascinated. The women who filed through his life had been sophisticated, as worldly as he was, chic and urbane and sensuous. They thought nothing of coming on to him with all sorts of physical and verbal sensuality. This woman was untouched, uncorrupted. She had a freshness, a vibrancy that made him wish he was young again, that he'd never had the experiences that had turned him bitter and cold inside. Not like other girls. Alright, so Cash and Chrissy are going on a date. Maud, who I haven't told you about yet, is the overweight housekeeper, of course, thinks that Judd is going to have a problem with it, but Chrissy's like, no, he'll be fine. Our marriage is only on paper. The drama. It's very soap opera, you know? I will say that the dialogue is like fun and they're flirting with each other is a good time. Man, their inner dialogues are so frustrating. Now on page 66, things have not gotten better. Chrissy and Cash went on their little date. There was a whole bunch of dialogue talking about their pasts for some reason. The least interesting way to get information. Judd, of course, threw a fit about her date with Cash. And while they were talking about this date, he was overcome with jealousy at the idea of Cash kissing her. So he kissed her so that he could be the first. And I can admit that the kiss was very sexy, well written, but that's pretty much all I can say about that. After the kiss, Judd turned it around and made it into this like fucking lesson for Chrissy. Like, that's how quickly a man can seduce you. I fucking hate this guy. So now the film crew and the actors are on the ranch, and of course Tippy Moore, I just can't get over that name, is a complete bitch to Chrissy for no fucking reason. I hate it when girls are mean to each other for no reason. Like, literally, she has no reason to have negative feelings about Chrissy in any way, except that she's already started flirting with Judd, but there are like 4 dudes there, so I don't know why she would assume Judd and Chrissy have a thing going on. And actually, there's no reason for Tippy to be interested in Judd at all, except that he's attractive, but there are like attractive men everywhere. I'm just very confused by this whole book. On page 82 now, and in addition to the poisoned cows, there have been other poisoned or freed cows. I don't know much about ranches. And Chrissy thinks it's all the same person. In addition to the poisoned cows, there's also been a murder that Cash and Judd are investigating. I can't help but think they're all combined or intertwined somehow. Also, on Cash and Chrissy's date, we found out that Cash hates models because his dad dated a model who was a complete fucking monster while his mom was dying. I just don't like, all of the characters in this book make sweeping generalizations about everyone based on bad experiences they've had. So Cash hates models because he knew a model that was a terrible person once, and Judd never wants to get married because women can't be trusted because his mom cheated on his dad when he was young, and his girlfriend left him because he didn't want to quit his dangerous job. So suddenly that means all women are flighty and irresponsible. Okay, page 90, and I've actually come across a passage that I really liked, and it's Chrissy and Judd talking to each other, and he's a Texas Ranger, and he's investigating a homicide, and they're having this talk about how hard it is for him and how Chrissy knows that. Read this article about how people in law enforcement have a hard time talking about things like this, but it still bothers them and there's nothing wrong with him, etc. So that's nice. How many positive things have I said about this book so far? Like 3? Page 141. Judd is still a giant dick. Chrissy turned 21, which was like the big birthday where they were gonna get annulled, and Judd fucking forgot about it. Apparently every year he takes her out for her birthday, and this year he forgot. So she went out with Cash while Judd was at some retirement party with Tippy. I feel very worked up about this. So right now we're at this emotional point for Chrissy where she is kind of fed up with him and is basically like, you know, let's just get this done and get this over with so I can fucking move on with my life. And I'm ready for that. Let's get that to happen. And she tells Judd all this, and he's like, well, we're not getting annulled until I'm ready for us to be annulled. I'm like, dude, you've been ready this whole time. This book is entirely miscommunication trope. The whole thing. I feel very invested for a book that I've not enjoyed. He just said that until he files for the annulment, she belongs to him. All right, page 156. So I'm more than halfway through this book now, but at some point in the last like 50 pages, Judd bought a ring for Tippy, like an emerald and diamond ring. And I don't really understand why, because he's insisting that he's not really dating her, like it's super casual, just like because she's interested in him and he's showing off a little. But he bought her a really fucking expensive ring that they can't afford just because she asked. So that's weird. And she's been showing it off on her engagement ring hand like it's some big fucking deal to Chrissy and saying how her business is now their business, etc. I don't really understand why, because clearly Tippy is not going to want to be with Judd if he's broke as fuck. The confusion. I feel like that confused stuffed monkey meme right now. All right, page 180, and our main characters are about to bang for the first time. It went like this. he had 3 beers after having a traumatic experience at work, and he looked at her and decided she was sexy and said something to himself about how she always looks sexy, but he tried so hard to deny it to himself. That hasn't really gotten you anywhere, bud. And then he says a whole bunch of cringy shit where, I don't know, he's like, it's been 5 years since I've had a woman because I take my vows seriously. And she's super turned on by that. And he is really obsessed about the fact that she's a virgin. I mean, he's brought it up in his inner monologue like 3 times now. He even said it out loud once. He said, I know you're a virgin. He said huskily, I'm excited by it. And you can feel that, can't you? But I'll be careful. Very, very careful. Oh, and then he's asked her if she's on the pill. And she's like, how did you know? And he's like, I saw them on your nightstand. But she doesn't mention that she hasn't taken them in 6 months. Because what would a Diana Palmer book be without an accidental pregnancy? Oh, he's becoming overwhelmed by his strong physical reactions. So, of course. Oh, of course, during this makeout sesh, she had a crisis about her small boobs throughout this whole book, which have been described as small and firm, or small and taut, or high and firm in general. And she's like, don't men like big boobs? And he's like, not all men. Page 204. And I'm getting to the point where I just kind of probably just like skim so I know what happens. Judd and Chrissy had sex for the first time, and the day after, Judd regretted everything, of course. And he went on this big long rant about they had to get divorced now, and Chrissy brought up him being engaged again, and he didn't deny it again. Just let her believe that he was gonna get engaged to someone else right after they got divorced. Judd is such a fucking moron. Like, he keeps going on these long rants. Like, he wants Chrissy to only want him, but also he doesn't want to be tied down, and also he doesn't want anyone else to be with her. And like, what a fucking dick. You're 34 years old. Get your shit together. All right, we're on page 208. Sorry, it's only been 4 pages. Tippy has just lied to Chrissy and implied that Judd told her that they had sex and that that he was disgusted by her. Chrissy confronted Judd, blah, blah, blah. There's a huge fight. Judd confronted Tippy. And while all this shit is going down, one of the Clark brothers shows up with a gun, and Chrissy steps in front of the bullet that was meant for Judd. I don't really understand why at this point, because he's kind of a dick, like, all around. All right, page 250. The end of this book is basically just miscommunication after miscommunication. Chrissy's almost dead. Judd is like, I'm so glad you're okay. And she's like, I know you are. And he tries to confess some feelings to her, and she's like, I don't want you being with me just because you feel guilty that I got shot for you. And he's like, that's not how it is. And, you know, they argue a bunch, and then they ignore each other, and then they see each other again, and they have sex. Repeat, repeat. And now Chrissy is pregnant. Of course, because they had sex a bunch of times and she never stopped to consider that, hey, maybe she should be on some fucking birth control. At one point earlier, I can't remember how I talked about this, Judd said some shit, I think it was in his inner monologue though, about how he was glad she was on the pill because otherwise he would be trapped in this relationship forever. That's dumb. So Chrissy's all nervous about telling him she's pregnant with good reason. She doesn't think she should have to because it's her decision. Which it is. Oh, great. Chrissy went to tell him she's pregnant, and she came across Judd and Tippy in the barn together, almost making out. And we know, because Tippy mentioned it to Cash, that the director has been trying to come on to her, and Judd is just trying to scare him off by being close to her. Pretend dating, you know? But Chrissy doesn't fucking know that. Okay, this is just too ridiculous, because after that scene in the barn, Chrissy was very upset, and got in her truck and went driving away, crying and hysterical, and got in a car accident. She drove into a river. This book is bad, but also I'm surprised it didn't fuck me up more as an 8th grader, because I'm pretty sure this is going to end with Chrissy saying she's pregnant and him saying, let's give this marriage a shot, with some sort of like, pregnancy can fix your relationship. Babies make families work kind of shit. Like, what the fuck? So Cash knows Chrissy is pregnant. Judd still doesn't know. And Judd has decided the best way to get this information out of Cash is to beat him up. So right now, they're literally having a fist fight, like men do. I just finished, and I was correct in my guess that he found out she was pregnant. He confronted her. She said, yes, it's true. I'm keeping the baby. And he was like, we have to be a real family. And then they were in love. I'm very confused. So it's safe to say that book 1 of the rereading books I used to love series was a disaster. Hopefully the next one will be better, because this was, I feel bad for 7th grade me. I mean, clearly this book wasn't written for a 7th grader, but still, even an adult woman reading this is just like the misogyny, the sexism, the stereotypes, the gender roles, like diversity, what's that? Everyone in this book is white and straight. Okay, I'm filming this later, but I just went to add Lawless to my Goodreads, and it is book 22 in the Long Tall Texan series. 22! Apparently there are 50 books in this series. What? Luckily, some of these reviews are hilarious. So if you enjoyed my ranting throughout this whole video, you should definitely go to Goodreads and read some of the 1-star reviews that people have left there, because their thoughts are very similar to mine. The mind boggles. If you like this video, hit like. I post book-related videos every Wednesday, so if you want to see more, subscribe. If you want to keep talking, you can find me on Twitter at Kelsey Reads, Instagram at Kelsey Reads, or Goodreads at Kelsey Lynn Reads. Otherwise, I'll see you next week.